Welcome to OOTO TV, the out-of-the-office investigation from the past into the future of health. Today, we're discussing life changes in an instant. From a clinical perspective, human neurology is evolutionarily wired to fiercely resist sudden behavioral shifts. The brain's primary directive is homeostasis, preserving energy and relying on established, predictable patterns to ensure survival, treating any rapid deviation as a potential threat. But that baseline occasionally reaches a breaking point. Under extreme pressure, the existing network fractures, forcing the system to establish new neural connections in seconds. External systemic shocks, accidents, sudden loss, or environmental collapses often bypass logical reasoning. They trigger an immediate survival response that creates severe psychological friction and strips away our perceived sense of control. Yet, clinical data provides a counterweight to that resistance. When provided with the exact conditions of leverage, the brain becomes highly neuroplastic. It possesses the capacity to rewrite deep-seated behavioral schemas in milliseconds. To understand this, we must distinguish between an exogenous systemic shock, a crisis forced upon you from the outside, and an endogenous cognitive threshold, an internal shift in perception that restructures your world from within. Life changes in an instant and can significantly impact your health. This EEG spurt screen illustrates the biological difference. An exogenous crisis registers as an erratic spike. An endogenous shift produces a synchronized, harmonic wave pattern. Today, we map this insight's architecture and the biomechanical habits required to sustain it. The instant is an observable inflection point. Failing to understand its mechanics often leads to adjustment disorders, while mastering it can turn a period of distress into one of actualization. You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. When a situational crisis occurs, the brain prioritizes immediate survival over long-term stability. The physiological response is optimized to remove the organism from danger, not to maintain psychological comfort or long-term goals. Looking at this 2D brain map, we can track the exact architecture of a crisis. The amygdala, pulsing here in red, acts as an emergency override. It sends signals that physically block neural pathways leading to the prefrontal cortex, our center for executive reasoning. This is a sequestro amygdalar, an amygdala hijack. It clinically strips away your autonomy. You cannot rationalize your way through a crisis when your brain is actively preventing you from accessing your own logic. If this block persists, the neural pathway diverts into a clinical loop known as an adjustment disorder. The system becomes trapped in a cycle of depressive and anxious symptoms, unable to process the change. When change is entirely forced upon a system that cannot adapt, the result is sustained psychological trauma and neurological friction. To understand how we can mediate these shocks, we turn to the framework of emotional intelligence, championed by researchers like Daniel Goleman. Emotional intelligence acts as a buffer for exogenous shocks. It allows a person to recognize the onset of an amygdala hijack and regulate their physiological response before the executive centers are completely taken offline. Life changes in an instant. By regulating that response, the brain converts raw distress into eustress, the productive form of stress that serves as a necessary catalyst for growth. Sudden anxiety, if properly mediated, bathes the brain in catecholamines. These chemicals accelerate attention and sharpen focus, allowing the individual to enter a high-performance flow. The physiological state during a crisis determines the path forward. It dictates whether the instant of change marks a period of decline or initiates a phase of heightened neuroplasticity. Targeting life changes in an instant results in significant impact on mental and physical health. Qualitative data on psychoanalytic insight suggests internally generated catalysts are just as powerful as external shocks. Clinically, this shift is marked by a sudden qualitative change in the patient's narrative coherence. It is the precise second a rigid defense mechanism weakens enough to allow a new realization to take hold. Watch this cascade. A single internal realization ignites a rapid chain reaction, rewiring the individual's entire perspective in real time. This internal spark provides immediate narrative structure. The confusion of the past dissolves, allowing the subject to articulate a coherent discourse and begin operating within a newly ordered reality. This brings us to behavioral models designed to trigger this shift intentionally, such as those popularized by Tony Robbins. Using neuroassociative conditioning, Robbins posits that instantaneous behavioral change isn't about innate ability. It is strictly a matter of finding the correct leverage and drive. This diagram illustrates the sequence. Permanent change initiates with a radical change in your physiological state. You must first shift the body state to disrupt an outdated story or mental schema. You cannot solve a problem using the same physiology that created the limiting belief. Once the old story is disrupted, the brain links intolerable pain to the old behavior and pleasure to the new one, causing the new strategy to snap into place automatically. Once the limiting story is divorced from the identity, the subject is instantly freed to pursue a new life path with total clarity. You're listening to OOTO TV, with research by author Paul Bulow. But we must be careful. That initial neurochemical rush, the afterglow of a breakthrough, is temporary. Without structural integration, the system naturally regresses to its previous state of homeostasis. You're listening to OOTO TV, with research by author Paul Bulow. To prevent that regression, we turn to the research on habituation conducted by authors like Charles Duhigg. Duhigg identifies keystone habits as the essential bridge between the temporary afterglow of a breakthrough and a permanent everglow in your life. A single small adjustment in your daily habits creates a domino effect. By utilizing the wonder of compound interest, optimizing one core behavior naturally transforms multiple adjacent areas of your existence. This everglow architecture shows the full process. It begins with the vertical spike of an epiphany, transitioning into a rising curve of daily consistency. Long-term change happens through specific, actionable steps. The instant starts it, but consistent action makes the change permanent. Targeting life changes in an instant exponentially leverages actualization that results in improved mental and physical health. Targeting life changes in an instant specifically for your needs builds healthy routines and habits. There are strict physical prerequisites to this. The brain cannot maintain a new cognitive strategy if its physiological base, sleep, diet, and activity is ultimately compromised. This is the blueprint of resilience, the integration of mental state shifts with rigid circadian routines and a dedicated health plan. Targeting life changes in an instant requires you to have a basic routine, a health plan, daily diet and sleep circadian routine, and process to provide the desired result for mental and physical health. The spark of transformation takes only an instant, but converting that flash into a permanent everglow requires